If you've ever wondered what the galaxy's most feared nightmare looks like up close, you're about to find out. But before we dive in, hit that like button, drop a comment on whether humanity could really tame the universe's deadliest predator, and subscribe so you never miss these insane HFY stories. Alright, let's begin. The chamber of the Galactic Council stretched wider than any cathedral on Earth. Its walls shimmered with light drawn from suns scattered across the spiral arms, woven into a crystalline dome that pulsed like a heartbeat. Delegates of 200 species filled tiered seats, their scaled, furred and plated faces carved into expressions of unease. The council rarely agreed on anything. Trade wars, border disputes, rival empires, all dragged on for decades. But today there was no dissent, no hesitation. Every delegate had the same shadow hanging behind their eyes, the apex predator. A holographic projection hovered in the chamber's center. It showed claw marks slashing through the hull of a war frigate, scars melted deep into plasteel. Then came images of entire squads reduced to scattered armor fragments, a colony hushed into silence with no survivors, only blood trails across walls. Each flickering frame carried one message: the apex predator was real, and it was on the move again. Ambassador Trull of the Sarek clicked his mandibles together, voice sharp as glass. We cannot allow another extinction. This creature exists only to kill. If we delay, it will find our worlds next. Murmurs rippled across the tiers. Some muttered prayers, others clutched ceremonial blades or charms. The galaxy was full of predators, but none matched this. Entire archives were dedicated to it. The apex moved faster than scanners, ripped through shields, and according to survivors, hunted with a cruel intelligence that mocked its prey. It never negotiated, never showed mercy, never stopped until every pulse of life in its path was silenced. At the dais, High Speaker Voss lifted his four-eyed gaze. The matter is settled. We will not sit idle. The apex must be destroyed before it grows stronger. The chamber trembled with agreement. There was no counterargument. No delegate dared to speak of peace or compromise. They had seen too many worlds burned in silence. From the shadows beneath the dais, a figure stepped forward. Commander Vaynar, war-scarred veteran of the Ulari legions, stood tall in gleaming exo-armor. His crest of bone spines flared as he saluted. My hunters are ready. We will track the beast. We will end it. His voice carried no boast, only certainty. Cheers echoed from some tiers, though others remained rigid, unable to summon hope. Vaynar's team had slain brood queens, plasma leviathans and void serpents. But the apex was no ordinary threat. The apex was legend. Only one delegate did not share the fear. Near the rear benches, in the seat reserved for observers from young species, sat a human. Captain Elias Ward leaned casually, hands folded, face lit with the faintest smile. He was broad-shouldered, dark-haired, and utterly calm. While others shifted in dread, his stillness was like a silent challenge to the room. His lips curved upward as if he had heard all this before. Voss's gaze fell upon him. Human, you were permitted to observe, not speak. Do not mistake this chamber for your battlefield. Elias inclined his head politely. Of course, High Speaker. I'll keep my thoughts to myself. But the glance he cast toward Vaynar carried weight, curiosity, almost amusement. The kind of look a man gives to a child announcing he'll wrestle a storm. Vaynar caught it. He bristled, spines rattling. Do you mock us, human? Elias's tone remained level, almost disarmingly calm. Not at all. Just wondering what story you'll tell when you come back. The silence that followed burned hotter than any plasma fire. Delegates exchanged uneasy looks. Some had fought alongside humans during skirmishes. They knew humans as stubborn, reckless, inventive. But not even humans claimed to laugh in the face of the apex. Voss slammed his gavel. Enough. Hunters, prepare. The council authorizes full pursuit. One by one, the delegates pressed their seals, sending beams of approval into the air until the chamber glittered with unified intent. The hunters would go. The apex would die. Vaynar bowed, then strode from the chamber. His team awaited in the arming bays below. 7 of the galaxy's finest killers, each outfitted with the deadliest weaponry known. Blades forged from neutronium. Rifles designed to pierce black hole armor. They stood at attention as their commander entered, pride gleaming in their eyes. We face death, Vaynar told them, voice echoing through the steel halls. But we will carve victory from it. No predator survives the Ulari hunt. His hunters roared agreement. They lived for this, the chase, the glory. Fear was for lesser beings. Yet, unnoticed by most, Captain Elias Ward followed quietly in their wake. He had clearance after all. Humans had been granted observer status for this mission. To the Council it was symbolic, a young race watching the galaxy at work. To Elias it was something else entirely. As the hunters boarded the obsidian cruiser that would carry them to the Apex's rumored lair, Elias took a seat near the rear of the tactical deck. He flipped open a leather-bound notebook, archaic in this age of holograms, and began to sketch. His pencil strokes were quick, practiced, forming the outline of something massive, fanged and coiled in shadow. One of the younger hunters glanced at his page and sneered. "You think you know the beast, human? We've studied it for lifetimes." Elias didn't look up. "Studying's one thing. Meeting's another." The hunter spat a curse and stalked away, muttering about arrogant primitives. Elias kept sketching, unbothered. When the cruiser's engines ignited, the stars blurred into streams of silver. Their course was set, a jungle world at the edge of mapped space, a planet scarred by ancient ruins and recent kills. That was where the apex had last been sighted, and where the hunters would test their courage against the nightmare. In the council chamber, the holographic projection of their departure flickered. Delegates leaned forward, some whispering prayers, others calculating what new weapons might be forged from the creature's corpse. Across the galaxy, news channels spread the word. The apex predator would fall. The council had declared it so. But among them, a quieter rumor began to spread, one whispered in the corners of ships and back alleys of trade ports. A rumor about humans. About how, somehow, they did not fear what others feared. About how this Captain Elias Ward looked upon the apex with eyes that did not tremble. In the observation lounge, Elias closed his notebook and leaned back, lips twitching at some private memory. He tapped the page once, fingers brushing the sketched outline of the beast. "Soon," he murmured under his breath, unheard by the others. The stars outside stretched endlessly, cold and infinite. But Elias Ward's expression was not one of dread. It was of a man waiting for something inevitable. Something familiar. And far across the void, in the depths of the jungle world, something stirred. A low growl rolled through the darkness, rattling stone pillars and sending flocks of winged beasts shrieking into the skies. The apex predator lifted its head, nostrils flaring as though it had sensed a presence long absent. Its eyes burned gold through the night. It began to move. The hunters were coming. But so was he. And only one of them knew the truth of what awaited. The cruiser cut through the void like a black blade, engines pulsing with muted thunder as it slipped from the currents of hyperspace. The hunters moved with military precision, wordless in their focus, each adjusting the weapons they trusted more than their own hearts. Commander Vaynar stood at the forward viewport, arms clasped behind his back, eyes locked on the looming silhouette of the planet ahead. The world had no official name, only a set of cold designations etched into council archives. Yet among the hunters it carried a darker title, the Predator's Lair. Its jungles were denser than steel, its storms unrelenting, its ruins older than recorded memory. But it was not the world that drew fear. It was what stalked beneath its canopy. "Descent in 90 seconds, the pilot barked. The hull groaned as the ship pierced atmosphere. Lightning clawed at the metal, rain hissed across the shields, and the jungle below unfurled like a living sea. Towering trees twisted together in an endless snarl, their trunks as wide as starship corridors. Gaps in the canopy revealed shattered stone towers, each carved with symbols worn smooth by millennia. It looked less like a wilderness and more like a graveyard built for gods. Vaynar's eyes narrowed. He had hunted across 5 sectors, had stood in battlefields where enemies stacked corpses into walls, but something about this place pressed against his bones. He pushed the feeling aside. Hunters did not bow to superstition. The ship landed with a shudder. Doors opened and the jungle's breath rushed in, thick, wet and sour, like air filtered through the lungs of some vast beast. The hunters disembarked, boots sinking into moss that oozed beneath each step. Their armor gleamed under dim light, but already vines coiled toward them, as though the jungle sought to reclaim intruders. "Perimeter," Vaynar ordered. They moved fast, planting pulsensors and erecting shimmering fields of energy. Spikes of data lit their visors as the jungle around them stirred with countless signatures, creatures the size of insects, others larger than armored carriers. But every reading scattered in panic. Even predators fled when the apex drew near. The silence it left in its wake was its herald. Elias Ward walked among them, unhurried, notebook tucked into his jacket. He did not carry a rifle, only a small pack slung casually over his shoulder. His boots sank into the same moss, yet he moved as though strolling through a familiar park. Vaynar caught the calm expression on his face and bristled. "You will stay within the perimeter," Vaynar snapped. "This is not your world." Elias looked at him, eyes steady. "Wasn't planning on wandering. See that you don't. My hunters have no time to protect an observer." A smirk flickered at the corner of Elias's mouth, but he said nothing more. He set himself down on a smooth stone slab, pulled his notebook free and began to sketch again. The lines came quick, arches of ruined towers, claw marks carved deep into ancient masonry. He shaded the edges until they resembled fresh wounds, still glistening. Hours passed as storms boiled overhead. The hunters ran drills, checked weapons, and whispered about the things that had come before them. One described a scout ship that landed here decades ago, 3 survivors stumbling back to orbit, each clawed half to death, swearing they'd seen golden eyes watching from the trees. Another spoke of a cargo convoy that vanished after passing this system, wreckage found orbiting the planet, cargo holds torn open as though by colossal jaws. Every tale fed the silence. Even the youngest among them, eager for glory, felt the weight settle heavier. Night fell like a curtain. The canopy swallowed starlight, leaving only the glow of energy fields to cast jagged shadows. The jungle quieted. Not the natural hush of sleep, but the suffocating stillness of something vast moving unseen. The hunters felt it in their marrow. They gripped weapons tighter, breaths shallow, hearts beating like trapped birds. Then a scream ripped through the dark. One of the hunters, patrolling just beyond the perimeter, vanished mid-step. His cry cut short, replaced by the sickening crunch of bone. By the time others swung lights in his direction, only shredded armor remained, smoking where claws had sheared through alloy. "Positions!" Vaynar roared. Floodlights burst to life, casting the jungle in harsh white beams. Branches swayed, leaves trembled, but nothing stood within sight. Sensors flickered wildly, picking up dozens of readings, then none at all, as though the forest itself bent around the intruder. Another crash. Metal shrieked as claws raked across the cruiser's hull. Sparks rained. The hunters spun, rifles spitting plasma into the night. Bolts tore trees apart, set foliage aflame, but the shadow moved faster. Something massive darted between the beams, too quick to track, too deliberate to be blind. One of the younger hunters screamed curses and charged forward. His blade glowed as he swung, but the jungle erupted with motion. A shape lunged from the dark, fanged, armored, immense. In a blur, the hunter was gone, his body snapped like a twig. Only his blade clattered back into the mud, hissing as it dimmed. The team reeled. And through it all, Elias Ward remained seated on the stone slab, notebook open on his lap. His pencil hovered above a half-finished sketch, unshaken. His eyes followed the shadows not with fear but recognition, as if watching an old acquaintance play games. "Don't shoot," he said softly. His voice cut strangely clear through the chaos. Several hunters snapped their heads toward him, stunned at the audacity. Vaynar snarled, spines bristling. "What madness is this? We're under attack." Elias's gaze did not leave the shifting dark. "You fire, you die. It won't stop until it's finished." The predator's silhouette appeared briefly at the edge of the lights. Its body was vast, plated in natural armor, muscles rippling like coiled storms. Golden eyes burned like twin suns through the rain. It crouched low, not from fear but from choice, as though deciding whether the prey before it was worth the effort. The hunters raised rifles in unison. "Hold!" Vaynar barked, though his own finger tightened against the trigger. The jungle exhaled a growl, low, rolling, powerful enough to rattle the fields of energy. It was not the sound of hunger nor of rage. It was a warning. A reminder. The apex predator had allowed them to live this long only because it had chosen to. Vaynar's throat tightened. His hunters looked to him for command, but he felt the weight of those golden eyes more than their expectant stares. For the first time in his life, Commander Vaynar felt the truth of prey. Beside him, Elias closed his notebook and slid the pencil into his pocket. He stood slowly, deliberately, every motion calm. The predator's gaze tracked him, muscles taut, claws gleaming wet under fractured light. Elias raised a hand, not with weapon, not with fear, but as one might to greet a companion. His voice was steady, almost gentle. "It's me." The growl deepened, then broke into silence. The jungle stilled. The hunters froze, weapons trembling in their grips. Vaynar's heart hammered like a war drum. He could not fathom what he had just witnessed. Elias stepped one pace forward, his boots sinking into the moss. The apex predator shifted its massive head, tilting, nostrils flaring. Rain poured down its armored back in streams. For a heartbeat, it seemed ready to strike, to end them all in one merciless rush. Instead it stopped. Its eyes locked with Elias's. The air between them thickened with something unspoken, heavy, incomprehensible. Then, with a movement that shattered every legend, the predator lowered itself onto its haunches. Not retreating. Not attacking. Waiting. Vayner could not move. His hunters stood paralyzed, trapped between disbelief and terror. The human, the fragile, primitive observer, was the only one the monster acknowledged. Elias's lips curved into the faintest smile. His voice carried softly through the storm. Good. You remember. The night pressed in around them, heavy with rain and silence, the jungle itself holding its breath. And the hunters realized with sickening clarity, the apex predator had not spared them out of mercy. It had spared them because of him. Because of the human who stood unarmed in its path. The storm thundered above, but no one spoke. The hunt had not ended. It had only begun. The storm did not relent. Lightning shredded the sky into fragments of silver, thunder rolled through the jungle like the voice of something older than stars, and still the hunters stood frozen in the mud. The apex predator crouched at the edge of their lights, its golden eyes unblinking, its massive frame steaming under the downpour. Every instinct screamed at them to fire, yet none moved. To shoot was to die, and even Vaynar's iron discipline cracked beneath that knowledge. Elias Ward remained the only figure who showed no fear. He stepped closer, each pace measured as though approaching a beast already leashed. The predator growled, a deep rumble that rattled armor plates, yet it did not lunge. Its gaze tracked only him. One of the hunters, a tall reptilian veteran, could endure the stillness no longer. He roared and swung his neutronium blade high, lunging into the light with fury. The motion shattered the fragile balance. The predator moved faster than vision. Claws like obsidian sides flashed once and the veteran was gone, body ripped in half before the blade hit the ground. Blood hissed on wet stone. The predator's growl rose to a thunderous roar, shaking leaves from branches, silencing every other sound of life. The hunters fired at last. Bolts of plasma lit the night in a cascade of blue fire. The jungle ignited, trees splitting under the onslaught. Yet the predator blurred between blasts, its armored hide shrugging off those that struck true. It crashed into the formation like a meteor. One hunter vanished beneath its claws, another hurled aside with a broken exosuit sparking in the mud. Vayner fought back with precision, his rifle locked on target, firing burst after burst. Each shot found flesh, sizzling across the predator's shoulder and flank, but the wounds only seemed to enrage. The beast spun, tail whipping like a battering ram, and Vayner flew against a shattered pillar. His armor buckled. His breath choked. Pain seared across his ribs, yet he forced himself up again, refusing to fall. Elias did not move to help. He simply raised one hand and whistled, sharp and cutting through the chaos. The predator halted mid-strike, claws dripping, chest heaving like a forge. It turned toward him again, muscles taut, eyes molten with recognition. The hunters stumbled back, disbelief carved into their faces. It was impossible. The apex killed without pause, without thought. Yet here it stood, holding itself at the sound of a human's call. Shadowfang, Elias said quietly. The name was nothing more than breath, yet the predator stilled. Its roar died into a low rumble. Vayner staggered upright, blood running down his jaw. He pointed a trembling claw at Elias. You control it." "No," Elias answered. His eyes never left the predator. "I don't control it. We understand each other." The hunters exchanged horrified looks. Understanding was not a word used for weapons of extinction. The predator stepped closer, lowering its massive head toward Elias. Rain sluiced down its armored hide, golden eyes glowing brighter. Then, with a sound that froze every alien heart, it pressed its snout against the human's chest like a hound seeking comfort. Elias's hand slid across its jaw, fingers tracing the ridges with ease born of memory. "Easy," he murmured. "Not them. Not tonight." Vaynar's voice shook with rage. "You knew. All along. You brought us here to die." Elias looked at him then, sharp as a blade. "I didn't bring you here. Your council did. I came to make sure you walked away with more than bodies." The silence that followed cracked under the weight of disbelief. None of them could speak. None of them could comprehend how the apex, something their histories had painted as the end of all things, would submit to a human's touch. The predator growled low, eyes narrowing toward the hunters. It remembered the sting of their weapons, the challenge of prey daring to resist. Its claws flexed against the earth. Elias knelt, pressing his palm firmly to its jaw. "Not them," he said again, voice steel wrapped in calm. The beast huffed once, then lowered itself to the ground, massive body folding like a predator satisfied after a kill. It lay beside him, chest rising and falling in steady rhythm, claws inches from the mud, golden eyes still watchful but no longer hungry. The hunters could not move. They stood in a ring of firelight, weapons raised yet useless, staring at the impossible scene before them. Vaynar spat blood, forcing his voice into command. "You will explain. Now." Elias met his gaze without flinching. He let the rain wash over him, hand resting calmly on the predator's scaled hide. His eyes drifted distant as though back through years. "Alaska," he said softly. "I was stationed there. Cold as death, forest stretching endless. I was tracking smugglers through the snow when I found it, half dead, bleeding, trapped in its own fury. Your apex." The hunters stared, unable to imagine such a thing wounded. It had been caught in a crash. Shrapnel buried deep, bones broken. It should have died. But it didn't. It fought to keep breathing. Elias's voice carried no pride, only memory. "I should have left it." Every instinct said run. But there was something in its eyes, not rage, not hunger. Just pain. So I stayed. I pulled the metal out, stitched the wounds, kept the fire burning through the blizzard. Day after day. His hand slid slowly across the predator's armored flank. It tried to kill me at first. Every time I got close. But it was too weak to finish. And every time it woke I was still there. Feeding it. Talking to it. Refusing to leave. Eventually it stopped trying. Elias's lips twitched faintly. I called it Shadowfang. Seemed fitting. Over time it started listening. Watching me, following me. Not tame, not a pet, but something else. When it healed it didn't leave. It chose to stay. The hunters could not process the words. The idea that the apex predator, scourge of galaxies, had once lain helpless at the hands of a human and then decided companionship. It defied reason. Vaynar's rage trembled in his bones. "You raised it. You unleashed this thing." Elias's gaze hardened. "No. You misunderstand. It's not unleashed, it's understood. You call it monster, weapon, extinction. But you never saw more. You never gave it a chance." The predator shifted beside him, rumbling low, eyes glinting at the hunters like smoldering suns. The message was clear, it tolerated their presence only because of him. The firelight danced across Vaynar's armor. His pride screamed for vengeance, but the weight of survival pressed heavier. He had lost half his team in minutes. To fight again was to die. To live meant bowing to the human who held the monster's loyalty. "Your council will never accept this," Vaynar rasped. Elias straightened, hand still steady on the predator's hide. "Then they'll have to learn. Because this isn't the nightmare they think it is. It's more. And if humanity can stand beside it, then maybe the rest of you should ask yourselves why." The words echoed, swallowed by the jungle's silence. The storm broke above, rain falling steadier, calmer, as though the world itself exhaled. The hunters lowered their rifles one by one, not in trust but in resignation. They could not win. They could only bear witness. Vaynar glared through blood and pain, voice ragged. "This ends at the council. You'll answer there. Both of you." Elias's expression remained unreadable. He gave Shadowfang one final pat, then met the commander's gaze. "Fine. Let them see." The predator rumbled as if in agreement, massive tail curling around Elias like a shield. Its golden eyes gleamed against the night, and the hunters felt the truth cut deeper than any blade. The apex predator was not their enemy, not their prey. It was the humans. And for the first time they feared humanity more than the beast. The black corridors of the cruiser thrummed with restrained anticipation, a kind of breathless silence that only came before history bent into a new shape. Captain Reeker's scaled hands rested on the tactical display, claws tapping faintly, as streams of council data scrolled across the holographic table. Reports of the apex predator's last known positions painted the stars in red sigils. Deep forest worlds, broken moons, derelict warhulks where the beast had been sighted hunting and feeding. Each sighting left only fragments. Corpses torn apart, ships hollowed like husks, hunter packs scattered and annihilated. And yet here it was, alive, elusive, and now, tethered to a human. He said the word human under his breath, and it tasted like disbelief. The rest of his squad stood in respectful silence behind him. Veterans all, seasoned hunters who had purged leviathans, broken war beasts, and even faced the plasmatides of Xyrath. Yet now, with the council's decree heavy upon them, they looked uneasy. Because this mission was different. This was not just a hunt. It was a reclamation, or an extermination. The predator had been the Council's nightmare for centuries, the unkillable, untamable scourge. And now the predator had been seen sleeping at the feet of a human soldier as if it were a companion. That detail unsettled them all more than any carnage ever could. The Council demanded answers, and answers required capture, or proof, or blood. Across the ship, James sat in a sealed chamber, stripped of his armor but not his poise. The room was meant to intimidate, every wall humming faintly with scanning equipment, every surface sterile and cold. Yet James sat relaxed, hands folded, his posture betraying no fear, only patience. His brown eyes were alert, sharp, as if he were cataloging every sound, every vibration of the ship's engines. The apex predator was not here, and that made the hunters bold. They thought James was only a man, that his bond with the beast was some strange accident. But James knew better. He had felt the predator's thoughts ripple through his dreams, felt its pulse in time with his own heartbeat, felt its hunger quiet at the sound of his voice. It was not chained to him, it had chosen him. And if they laid a hand upon him, it would come. Reeker entered the chamber, his soldiers fanning out like shadows. "Human," he began, his voice deep and harsh, layered with authority. "You will tell us where the beast sleeps." James smiled faintly as if the question were almost amusing. "What? So you can try to kill it again? How many teams have you sent already? 10? 20? His gaze flicked across the room. "How many came back whole?" The silence that followed was heavier than any weapon. Reeker's mandibles tightened. "It is not natural. That creature is death embodied. Do you not understand what you cradle at your side? It is not a pet. It is extinction given form." James leaned forward, his voice calm, steady. "Funny. It hasn't killed me. Hasn't even tried. You keep calling it extinction, but it sleeps at my door, listens when I speak, and guards me like family. Maybe the problem isn't the predator. Maybe the problem is you." One of the hunters snarled, tail lashing, but Reeker raised a clawed hand to silence him. He studied the human carefully, noting the lack of fear, the absence of lies in his scent. He wanted to believe this was posturing, some trick of human arrogance. Yet the more he listened, the more a chill crept through his scales. What if the predator had indeed bonded? What if it had found in humanity something the Council had never offered? "You will guide us to it," Reeker said at last. "Willingly or bound. We will see the truth with our own eyes." James tilted his head, considering, then rose smoothly to his feet. "You think you're hunting it," he said softly. "But really, it's waiting for you." The journey to the planet where the predator rested was drenched in tension. The hunters prepared in silence, weapons gleaming under harsh light, traps calibrated, nets energized to withstand strength that could shatter armored bulkheads. Yet under it all was a current of unease, as if they were walking into a myth rather than a mission. James stood at the center of it all, unshackled but watched, calm as a man who had already seen how the ending would unfold. When the cruiser descended through the storm-thick skies, lightning clawed at its hull, and the forests below writhed like a living ocean. The hunters disembarked with precision, forming a perimeter, their scanners sweeping the undergrowth. The air was damp, heavy, alive with unseen eyes. And then, silence. A shape emerged from the shadows. The predator. It was larger than the Council's records had captured, its body a perfect fusion of muscle and menace, its eyes glowing with predatory fire. Every hunter froze, instincts screaming, weapons trembling though trained hands held them. The predator's gaze swept across them, and then shifted toward James. And the beast moved not with rage but with a strange, deliberate calm. It padded through the hunters' formation, their weapons useless at their sides, and lowered its massive body beside James like a warhound at rest. Its head pressed against his chest, rumbling with a low, protective growl. The hunters did not breathe. Reeker stared, his disbelief cracking into something rawer, fear, awe, perhaps even reverence. For the predator had ignored them all. The only one it saw, the only one it recognized, was the human. James placed his hand upon the predator's head, his expression unreadable. "You wanted proof," he murmured. "There it is." One hunter's weapon twitched upward. The predator's eyes flashed, and the air itself seemed to thrum with warning. In that instant, every hunter realized the truth. This was no beast to be caged. It was a force bound by choice, by bond, and their lives hung by the thread of its restraint. Reeker slowly lowered his own weapon, claws flexing. "What are you, human?" he whispered. James's voice was quiet, yet it cut sharper than any blade. "I'm the one it trusts. And that's something you'll never take from me. The storm raged overhead, lightning splitting the sky, as the hunters stood trapped between duty and survival. The council had sent them to bring back a monster. Instead, they had found a truth too dangerous to carry home. And in the eyes of the predator, glowing like embers in the dark, it was clear, the decision of what came next would not belong to the hunters nor the council. It would belong to the bond forged between man and monster, and the galaxy would tremble before it. The council chamber, once a sanctuary of order and pride, had devolved into a trembling theater of fear. The delegates leaned forward in their elevated thrones, eyes narrowing, mandibles clicking, feathers flattening, horns twitching, every body language of unease manifesting at once. The feed flickered on the great wall of light, not a simulation, not propaganda, but raw footage gathered by the hunters themselves. A monster beyond comprehension, Tauroth, the apex terror catalogued as uncontainable, unkillable, a nightmare birthed in the darkest corners of the void, was sprawled on a couch, its obsidian carapace gleaming faintly under the pale glow of a desk lamp. And beside it, as casual as one resting after a day's labor, lay Marcus Kane. A human. A soldier turned exile. And the predator's companion. No one in the chamber dared speak first. The silence was unbearable, fractured only by the occasional static on the feed, as if the universe itself mocked them with this revelation. The predator's claws flexed lazily in its sleep, a faint rumble emanating from deep within its body, a sound that should have been terror incarnate but instead mimicked the rhythm of a purr. One delegate finally found his voice, but it was thin, brittle, like glass stretched too far. The apex predator, it sleeps. By a human. Not bound. Not caged. Not threatened. What is this? The voice of Chairman Valcor cut through the murmurs like a blade forged of ice. It is submission. Not to us. To him. His scaled hand trembled only once as he gestured toward the human figure. The creature has chosen. And it has not chosen the council. On a separate feed, the hunters' ships lay wrecked on the forested world, smoking husks cradled by the trees. Dozens of lives lost, resources squandered, pride shattered. They had been sent to retrieve or destroy, but none had anticipated this outcome. None had expected the predator to find kinship. Marcus stirred in the recording, unaware that half the galaxy now scrutinized him. He shifted slightly, his head resting against Taurotha's armored flank. His hand idly brushed against the predator's plating, fingers tracing patterns on the surface like one would with a loyal hound. The predator shifted in response, not in aggression but in contentment. The feet cut there, but the damage was permanent. Across the chamber, whispers grew venomous. He has tamed it. He commands it. No, he belongs to it. Either way, the balance is broken. Marcus Kane himself knew none of this. As he woke to the sound of Taurotha's low rumble vibrating through the walls of the small cabin, his mind was less on politics and more on the strange peace he had stumbled into. He swung his legs off the couch, rubbed his eyes, and looked down at the predator. The beast's eyes opened, those molten gold orbs meeting his with a depth Marcus still couldn't define. Neither pet nor master, but a bond that surpassed simple categories. You're heavy, you know that? Marcus muttered with a crooked smile. Tauroth blinked once, slow and deliberate, as if humoring the observation. Yet beneath the tranquility, Marcus could feel the storm pressing closer. The hunters had been destroyed, but that would only draw more attention. The council never accepted defeat. It bled others for its pride until nothing was left. His communicator buzzed faintly. Against his better judgment, Marcus activated it, and the flickering hologram of Commander Ilian, his old comrade, formed in the air. The man's face was strained, voice hushed. Marcus, what the hell have you done? Marcus arched a brow. Good to see you too. Let me guess, you've seen the footage. Seen it? The whole damn council has. You're not just a fugitive anymore. You're something else. They don't understand it. They fear it. And Marcus, when the council fears something, it burns it out of existence. Marcus glanced toward Tauroth, who had risen to its full height, stretching like a shadow swallowing the room. Its gaze flicked to the hologram and a growl thrummed low in its chest. Ilian flinched, but Marcus lifted a hand. Easy. He's a friend. I'm not sure what you call that thing, Ilian said, but it's not a friend. It's a weapon. And they're already preparing fleets. If you don't control it. Marcus cut him off. It's not a weapon. It's a choice. It could have killed me 100 times. It didn't. It's here because it wants to be. Then you'd better hope its loyalty holds when the sky burns. Ilian's image shimmered, fading. They're coming, Marcus. And this time they'll bring the galaxy's full wrath. The transmission ended, leaving Marcus staring into the quiet. Tauroth tilted its head, then lowered itself until its face was level with Marcus. There was an intelligence there, one that words couldn't capture. Marcus leaned forward, his forehead nearly touching the creature's armored crest. "Looks like it's us against the universe." Tauroth rumbled, and Marcus felt it through his bones, a resonance like agreement. When the fleets arrived, the planet itself trembled. Warships cast shadows across the forests, their engines splitting the clouds. The Council believed it had numbers, firepower, inevitability. What it didn't understand was that the predator at Marcus's side was no longer an enemy to be cornered but an ally who chose to fight. The battle erupted with fury. The skies lit in fire as missiles streaked downward, forests ignited and plasma scorched the air. But Tauroth moved like death incarnate, its body a blur of shadow and steel, tearing ships from the air, rending walkers from the ground, every strike echoing with the weight of a storm. And Marcus, armed with nothing but his soldier's instinct and the bond he had forged, guided the predator, marking targets, luring enemies into its path, the two moving as one. The hunters had once called Tauroth the Unbroken. Now the galaxy would remember it as something worse, the Chosen. From the Council's vantage, what they saw was not a monster rampaging unchecked, but something worse, the fusion of humanity's will with the galaxy's ultimate terror. Marcus fought with precision, daring, and adaptability, and the predator answered in kind, its violence honed by human intuition. They were not weapon and wielder. They were partners. When the last Council flagship broke and fled into the void, the battlefield lay in ruin. Fires smoldered, ships cracked open like carcasses. Marcus stood amid it all, his body bruised and burned but alive. Tauroth loomed over him, scarred but unbowed, its golden eyes still alight with that same enigmatic fire. The galaxy would whisper of this day for millennia. That the Council had sent hunters, then fleets, and found themselves broken. That the predator they feared most had not been destroyed but had chosen. And worse, it had chosen humanity. As the smoke curled into the heavens, Marcus looked up, chest heaving, and let a sharp laugh cut through the silence. "Guess we just made history, partner?" Tauroth lowered itself, pressing its armored head against his shoulder with surprising gentleness. For a moment, soldier and apex, human and nightmare, stood together not as predator and prey, not as master and servant, but as equals who had defied the galaxy itself. And in that union Marcus knew with absolute clarity, no council, no fleet, no empire could ever sever what they had built. The universe's deadliest predator had found its place, not as a weapon of fear, but as a companion to the most unpredictable force of all, humanity. The Council's reign trembled that day, for it realized too late that in trying to contain the predator, it had unleashed something far more dangerous. Not the beast, the bond.